Erica Bream, lovely to
Jennifer
see
Apple.
you.
Oh, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I am so grateful that you have made the time to come into this land over here with us, hailing all the way from, we just talked about this, Asheville, North Carolina.
Yes, the cackalack.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, people who are actually from here. I feel like
Right.
I totally just stole it. So
You've been there for enough years now that I feel like it's kind of like you earn your stripes. If you've been in New York for 10 years, it's like you've
that's
seen enough that you can say like New York is home. I feel
yeah.
like Asheville can't be that long before you like have been here.
No, I mean everybody here's a transplant, so
Yeah.
there's very few actual natives. But yeah, we're here. We're here in Asheville, and it's wonderful. We love
I
it.
love it.
Mhm.
Well, for anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
Who am I today? The that is such an interesting question because I feel like I'm gonna lead with something that I don't normally lead with.
Great.
Um, but I am a mom who's getting over a cold
Great.
that I received from my children
Mhm.
lovingly. Um, I am a casting director. I am a career consultant and coach. And I am somebody who occasionally spends too much time using their thumbs to post on Instagram.
Which I think is like how I came to really be like, you must be on this podcast because you've been such a giver of information, and this is a podcast that really tries to give of information that frankly I
True.
didn't have access to, which is really, I just want other people to have it before I did. like
Totally.
and so I think that's why I was like, we must, this is, thank you. um
Yeah,
but
totally.
also I love how you led with something that maybe isn't your usual. That's why I asked the question the way I ask it, because I think that's an opportunity for people to put into the space what they're really feeling initially, and like being more present with oneself, I think is arguably what we're all trying to do in this
Yeah, and
industry.
things are busy, and I'm a working parent, and my
Yeah.
husband is the full-time parent, which is great and
Yeah.
wonderful. But when kids get sick and grown-ups get sick, sometimes you are simply parenting, momming,
Yeah.
resting, trying so hard to
Yeah.
get over it, to
Yeah.
like go back to some semblance of normalcy. So this
Yeah.
this week, both kids went down with this really delicious head cold, and
Yum.
you know, both had a solid day of just misery,
Ugh.
and I kind of stopped doing what I normally do, and I just
Yeah.
sat and snuggled and watched Daniel Tiger with them and
Oh.
fed them liquids, and that really was the priority this week. And it's nice to be able to do it. It's nice to be able to
Yeah.
have the flexibility to do it.
And good on
So
you for being able to recognize that priorities can shift. I
yeah,
think like offering oneself grace all over, especially in this like post-COVID pandemic,
yeah,
but like back to normalcy. But what is that? Like all of the,
sure,
the grace just really required to simply be a human, let alone somebody who is working. And I would
yeah,
imagine, let alone somebody who is working with little children who are coming home and
yes.
bringing diseases. So
Yes.
yeah.
And it's so interesting because I was in LA forever as a casting person, and never in a billion years would we have thought we could do our jobs from home. Like
Yeah.
never.
Yeah.
When I moved here, it was terrifying to try to figure out how I was going to make it work. At the time, my oldest son was only 5 months old,
Wow.
and I was like, I just could not figure it out. So to be able to have a job nowadays where you can work from home, you can be present for that stuff, you can be present for the snuggles and continue working
Yeah.
is really a lifestyle gift that I just never knew was possible.
Mm,
Never envisioned it. I mean, that's part of why we left Los Angeles is that, we thought we were going to have to put our kids in daycare
yeah.
forever and ever and ever and never see them because we were working so many hours in our respective workplaces and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it truly is a gift. Technology can be very frustrating, of course,
Yeah.
and scary sometimes, but it's also, I mean, it has really changed lives. And I think a lot of people, especially parents, young parents are seeing what is possible. You don't have to spend all of your time in an office now. You can
Correct.
spend time working, and then you can stop and take a break and go have dinner with your family, tuck your
Yeah.
kids in, go
Yeah.
back to work if you need to. And, I mean, it's dreamy, I have to say.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yes.
awesome.
Well, tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are career-wise. I think for
Sure.
me in this space, it's always very important for people to just have context so that whatever information follows comes from a space of knowledge. Like, oh, yeah, this is where the person is coming from. So
Sure.
I'm curious how you got to casting generally, but also more specifically what you're doing now.
So I wanted to be a casting director, if you can believe it or not. When I was like 16, 17, like getting ready to apply for college,
Hmm.
I made a hard right turn away from wanting to be a doctor and being like, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. And I was like, I had loved acting. It had been in all my high school musicals and plays and
Hmm.
stuff like that, but I didn't want to be an actor. I really, really struggled to audition for those plays and
Yeah.
musicals, and that is, about as low stakes as it gets. And I just was not interested in taking it seriously
Yeah.
as a profession. But I really loved collaborating. I've always loved theater since I was a really teeny tiny child, and so I became interested in casting because I thought, well, this must have something to do with acting. And so I decided to apply to film schools. I graduated high school. I started interning immediately. I actually started interning in Manhattan in New York City, at a talent agency. They hooked me up with a casting office to help out one day. That one day was the day where that completely solidified my passion
Wow.
for this craft, because I was like, this is the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. And I just sat in the waiting room. All I did was be in the waiting room with
Wow.
the actors. And it was a commercial casting. It wasn't, theatrical or anything, but it was so fun. It was so fun. And the energy was amazing. And it was an unair conditioned New York high rise building,
Yeah.
and in July. And I just loved every minute of it. So I started interning. I went to USC for film school, and I started interning between semesters, between my years, and just went to different talent agencies, went to studios, went to independent casting offices. These are things that largely you can't really do today. Somebody was asking me how you get into casting now, and I'm
Hmm.
like, well, the CSA has created a training and education program, which didn't exist when I was getting into it. And they're like, oh, I thought everybody just interned, and I was like, yeah, we used to,
Yeah.
but they don't let you work for free anymore, and people can't afford to pay interns.
Right.
So I had a lot of unpaid internships, and then when I graduated, I got my very first real casting assistant job on a TV show, with my very distant cousin, if you can believe it or not. I'm like a nepo baby adjacent, I
Yeah.
guess.
Great.
Um, um, and from there, literally every single job led to the next for me. I worked with Ronnie Yeskel for about a year. Um, and we had been working on a couple of CBS projects. Those My jobs with Ronnie ended, and I was looking for a job. And somebody at CBS was like, "Hey, we have an opening in our casting department here at the network. Do you want to come work here?" And
Hmm.
I was like, "Stability, great, sign me up." Went there for a year. After that, once that I was coming up on a year there, and the agreement I had made when I went to work there was that I would work for a minimum of a year,
Okay.
at CBS. So I was coming up on a year, and I was ready to go. And April Webster was looking for a new assistant or associate on a CBS show.
Hmm.
So I called there and I was like, "Hi, I work at CBS and I know your show really well, and whatever." And they interviewed me, and I ended up that with that job. Work with April was relatively consistent, I would say, but things would end, and then I would go work with one of her friends and co-casting directors on something else. And so literally every job led from one to the next until I left. I had my child, and I was like, I'm leaving
Yeah.
Los Angeles. Here I go. Um, and we moved out here to the Southeast, and it was really, really, really hard, I would say, for the first 6 months. And I always tell actors this. Actors are always asking me, like, should I move markets? Should I change? Should I go from New York to LA? Should I go from LA to Atlanta? What should I do? And first of all, I always give them the sort of broad strokes of the different markets, but then at the end of the day, I always tell them the same thing, which is you have to decide where you want to live when you are not acting.
That part. That part.
That's the most important part, right?
Mhm.
Because they all have pros and cons. So where do you want to be when you're not acting, right?
Mhm.
That is the end goal. And the other thing I remind them of is that when you change markets, you're effectively starting at zero.
Mhm.
Okay. You're not starting your craft over, you're not starting your technique over, but you're starting your relationships at zero.
Yeah.
And as somebody who worked and had a lot of really wonderful relationships in Los Angeles for my 17 years that I was there, I took meetings before I left. I told everybody I knew that I was moving, please hire me in the Southeast. I got here and it was crickets. It was absolute crickets. And I thought, oh, what have I done?
Mhm.
I have given up a really successful career that I loved, in a city that I loved with friends that I adored that I've had since I was 18 years old. And I have no friends here. We can't afford to furnish this big house that we bought. I have an infant that
Yeah.
I have not yet figured out how to parent properly. And it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of time. And my problem, my ego problem was that I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be easy. I
Mhm.
thought it was going to be so easy. All the people who I met with, all of my studio execs and everybody who I met with before I left all said the same thing, which was so nice. They said, oh, we love you so much. We can't wait to work with you down there. And I assumed like, cool, done,
Yeah.
the end. That's all I gotta do. And that's not what you gotta do, because of course there were other Southeast casting directors that have been here for a lot longer than
Yeah.
me who had those relationships and were sort of at top of mind when the studios were thinking, okay, we need a Southeast person. So I spent a lot of time, first of all, getting over myself. That
Mhm.
was a real soul searching kind of moment. And just trying to do different things. That's sort of when I started coming up with the idea of I started doing online classes then. Could not sell them to save my life. People were like, what? You want to do this online?
Mhm.
I it was a special time to try to sell those. Um, and so I tried other things. Just different things. And along the way, I tried sort of reinvigorating my relationships, my LA based relationships, because those are the people who hire us. So my studio execs in LA. And sure enough, with a sort of continuous reminder, one of my execs who happened to be a friend, he and I had worked together with April a billion years ago, called me up and he was like, hey, I have a show. I want you to meet on it. And I was like, okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
And it happened to be with producers that I had worked with when I was in Los Angeles. And so it was sort of a smooth transition into that one, which was great. But then everything kind of stopped again. And I had to do the same thing where I would
Mhm.
email my casting executives every 6 months or so and be like, hi, I'm still here in the Southeast.
Mhm.
Here's my current resume. Can't wait to work with you. I would go back to LA twice a year and try to take meetings and, remind people that I existed.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of time. And honestly, that I did not. So we moved in 2017. I did not work consistently down here as a Southeast casting director until 2020,
Wow.
believe it or not.
Yeah.
So there, when I was in LA, everything was one to the next, to the next, to the next, all through relationships and, whatever. And here it really is sort of restarting my reputation as a Southeast based casting director. And so it has been a bumpier, more inconsistent road, which has been stressful,
Yeah.
but it has also been incredibly rewarding. I have gotten to work on so many different types of projects down here, largely when I was in LA, because I was working with a lot of the same people. We were working with a lot of the same producers, which often live in the same genres and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which is great. And I loved it. But here, like, I'm doing a comedy, and then I'm doing a feature, and then I'm doing a sci-fi thing, and then I'm doing a fantasy thing. And it's all different. I get to work with different LA casting directors that I didn't necessarily get to do when I was there, because I was working with the same
Yeah.
people over and over and over again, who I loved.
Yeah.
I chose to work with them over and over and over
Yeah.
again, but it's fun to have to change it up and get to meet other peers. And it's so great to get to know this market. The actors in this market are wonderful. I love working with the different reps down here. And, I really have found a lot of peace and happiness being a Southeast casting director. That is just, when I moved here and I was struggling so hard, I was like, is this ever going to happen for me
Yeah.
again? Or do I need a brand new career?
Yeah.
And these last couple of years have been incredibly fulfilling. My cup feels very full.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
That was a long answer. I'm so sorry. It was
No,
long.
don't apologize. I think, it's coming from an actor perspective on my end over here, and I guess I wear many hats too, so it's not exclusively actor, but we often forget, and I'll speak very generally, which is not
Sure.
fair, but we often forget that people in the industry who aren't just actors also go through bumps.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
casting directors are more often than not freelance people as well,
Yeah.
and
Most of
the
us.
hustle of that is similar, albeit different, but similar in that relationships really matter, and
Hmm.
fostering those relationships in an authentic and truthful and transparent way is necessary. And that
Yeah.
sometimes it's not always linear, and that
Hmm.
sometimes big life shifts like change the way that things go, even though you thought that it was going to go a certain way, or even when like you thought it was going to go a certain way, it doesn't go that way. I mean, all
Sure.
of those things are relevant not just for performers. And so
Yeah.
thank you for shedding light
Yeah.
to that, so that we can
Yes.
be reminded that casting directors are humans.
We're human beings. We have to
Uh-huh.
meet on jobs. I mean,
Yep.
it's not quite the same as an audition, but we do have to meet on jobs.
Yeah.
We don't always win those jobs. We can
Yeah.
get our avail checked and then nothing happened. We
Correct.
can get fired. Like
Yeah.
all of the things that actors experience, we experience too. It's a different scale, of course.
Yeah.
Where I'm not meeting on a project multiple times a week the way an actor would audition multiple times a week. But we're independent, much like actors. We also, casting directors, they didn't have the ability to be in a union until about 20 years ago.
Right.
And some of us who don't live in LA, New York, are not in the union, not by choice, but because we're not supported by our locals.
Hmm.
Here, there's not enough of us. The Broadway casting directors are not unionized, which they've been fighting for years now. So, again, I think a lot of actors think of casting directors as these almost akin to producers. And I think part of that is that we work with all above the line
For
talent,
sure.
but we are paid below the line
Yeah.
and treated below the
There
line.
was a Playbill article that just came out about Broadway minimums,
Hmm.
which is such an interesting timing considering, the union is going through negotiations right
Sure.
now. And it's just like, well, look at that. And there's this one video going viral at the moment, breaking down like all of once you've paid for your rent, and once you paid for your
Oh,
Metro
sure.
card, and once you paid for your Con Ed bill, and once you paid for Spectrum because they have a monopoly, and once you paid for this, and once you paid for that, this is, and your reps, if you have both an agent and a manager, like
Right.
this is actually your takeaway, and how unsustainable any of that is. And that's talking at like a Broadway minimum rather
Sure.
like it's just, and that's like a Broadway contract, forget an off-Broadway contract, forget a regional
Right.
contract, forget,
Right.
I mean, like we're not even, it's just really mind-boggling
Right.
to think about all of that. But I'd love to kind of jump in to a lot of questions that I feel like many of us have,
Sure.
and see if we can kind of just like play ping pong around all of this
Ping
in
pong away.
no
Let's
particular order.
serve it
Great.
up, Jennifer. I'm ready.
Amazing. So this is my first question of the many that live in my brain. Let's say you have an artist, an actor specifically, who is unrepresented, and
Mhm.
they are really hoping to delve more into on camera work specifically.
Mhm.
If I'm talking about the New York market over here, you have, EPAs and ECCs where you can kind of advocate for yourself and go and show up and sign up for these things and wait, which that's a
Sure.
whole other conversation about the system. But
Uh-huh.
let's say you're trying to do more TV and film and on camera work. What do you recommend for artists who are not represented, first and foremost, to have access to these types of opportunities, and or to begin like building these relationships with casting directors or projects so that eventually people are thinking of them for those things?
Sure. So without an agent or a manager, you will largely not have access to some of the bigger film and TV roles. Of course, we do open calls, and those are always going to go out wide. And I encourage you to, when you see them, to take part in them. We have found a lot of very interesting people in open calls, and if we haven't cast them, we've certainly thought of them for other things, and maybe even helped them find a rep if we thought this is a person who really should be seen by
Are you
people.
putting those open calls when you put them out on Actors Access? Are you putting them out on casting networks? Like, where are you putting them?
So, for me, largely we spend our time on Actors Access and Breakdown
Mhm.
Services, which are it's the same company. The
Yeah.
Breakdown is the casting agent and manager side. Actors Access, of course, is Actors Access. The occasionally for me, I will also put out an open call through social media.
Mhm.
I don't generally use casting networks. A lot, I feel like Backstage, I love Backstage for all of the articles and resources they provide, but I don't use it as a casting resource.
Mhm.
I know some markets, more so New York, do. Um, but I don't. So yeah, I would say Actors Access, that's where they go, and or social media. So following casting people on social media is never a bad thing.
Mhm.
Um the but largely the unrepresented actor will not have access to your typical film and TV role, mostly because we cannot put those out on Actors Access for every single role. We would triple our submissions
Mhm.
because actors who do have reps would still submit themselves.
Yeah.
So it becomes very, very redundant, and you just can't go through all that stuff. Part of what we use our agents and managers for too is sort of they're sort of the first line of line of defense is like a terrible phrase to use here, but they're the first people to see an actor, spot the talent, and be like, we're going to sign this person, so we're trusting that what they're bringing to the table is really, really worthy, right?
Mhm.
So we're going to rely on that too. um that said, we're looking for good talent wherever we can find it,
Right.
right? So we're looking for it in a play, in a showcase, in a short film. I have found actors that I really love on other people's reels.
Yeah.
So it's an actor's reel, and I'm like, wait, who is this person? And I can track them through IMDb because the project's on IMDb and whatever. Um, the one piece of advice I would give to any actor who's not represented is you have to make sure we can find you. You
Mhm.
have to make sure you have contact information somewhere available online, whether it's on your Actors Access, it's on IMDb, it's on your website, wherever. Make it so we can find you. Oftentimes actors will not have a rep, they'll be between reps, whatever. And I'm like, oh, what happened to so and so? And we'll try to track them down. And because they don't have an email or a phone number or whatever, our only recourse is to send them a email and never know if they're going to open
Yeah.
it or not. So make sure we can find you if you don't have reps, because casting doesn't forget really good actors. It doesn't matter where we found you, it doesn't matter how we came across you. We're going to remember, and we're going to want to track you down. So just make it easy for us to do that. Make it so that we aren't having to tweet at you and hope that somebody who knows you sees it and is like, here's a thing that I think
Yeah.
it's you. Is this you? And
We've heard so often, like, casting will remember, casting will remember. What does that mean for you? Is it that you have a now, I would imagine, virtual, like, folder of every single person that's ever auditioned, that's ever come through your desk? Is it more just like you in your brain have, like, a gorgeous Rolodex of, like, categorizing people by certain things and you just, like, have great recall? What is your process with remembering?
It's both, it's both. I would say for most casting directors, it's both, because we do like the really yummy performances are lodged there.
Mhm.
They might be bits and pieces. So I'll be like, okay, this guy I read for for this particular. I can remember the project. He read for this project. He read for this role in this project. He was 6'4". He had really icy blue eyes, and he had red hair. And I can sort of either feed that information to my associate or assistant who worked on that project with me, and I can be like, it was so and so, or I can be like, okay, it was this project, this role, and I can go through my virtual
Mhm.
library and find that person that way. But we have both of those ways of doing it. The nice thing about self tapes is that it's so easy to have a virtual library of all of our previous auditions. Back in the day, back in my old days of starting, we did keep all those auditions, but they were on like VHS
Yeah.
or mini D. I mean, I remember I used to cart these friggin' mini DVs from office to office to office, and to play them
Oh
back, you
my
had to
god.
put them into the camera, hook the camera up to the VCR.
Yeah.
fast forward on the camera, find what you need to find, and then maybe dub it onto a VHS to be able to show it
Oh my
to. I
god.
mean, it was just the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
But now it's so easy. I've got my entire history, and they exist in the cloud, whether it's on Casted, EcoCast, or it's in my own Dropbox folders or whatever. And it's great. It's really easy to track down and be reminded of somebody that way.
Mhm.
But we never ever forget the way a performance made us feel. We can remember it forever. I mean, I have so many stories of I don't remember the exact dialogue. I don't even remember the actor's name, but I can picture their face. I can picture the thing that made me feel something.
Yeah.
And then if I need to backtrack it to figure out who that person actually is, then I can do it that way. But I was actually just telling somebody about a performance that I saw, gosh, 10 years ago. It was almost exactly 10 years ago, in a play. And I will never, ever, ever forget this performance. And I
Wow.
remember specifically the thing that made me feel something and be shocked and surprised and whatever. And I can remember this actor's body language.
Mm.
Like I remember the way he was standing. Like it was it's such a visceral memory. So, that's the thing, is that we remember that stuff.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do. Part of our job.
You mentioned self-tapes, and so I
Mhm.
wanna get into it
Hit me.
because this is the way of the future in many respects. I think the conversation around in-person
Mhm.
versus self-tapes and how many actors, crave the in-person versus the self-tape. I know for myself, the other week I was in person for, like, a first round audition, which was been so rare. It's
Oh my
more like
gosh.
if I
Yes.
had a callback, then
Sure.
maybe, but the first round, I remember sitting in, was it Pearl Studios? And, like, even just walking in there, the energy
Yeah.
surrounding me, I was like, "Oh, no. No, no, no." Like, my body wasn't ready for that. And just sitting in, like, the holding area, I guess, with, like, all these other actors, and everyone's in the same boat. So there was some beautiful camaraderie around all of us being like, "Well, first round, who knew?"
Uh-huh.
And,
Uh-huh.
I was literally given the note in the room, like a reminder, like, reminding you you're not in a box. And I was like, "Oh my god, you're right, I have an MFA in acting." Like, and I'm being told that I'm quote
That you can
unquote
move.
"small" or that I could move. And I was like, "Thank you so much." Because arguably this director could have just been like, "Wow, this person, like, only acts for film," which like, my entire
Sure.
background is not in that at all. But
Sure.
it's
Sure.
just like the forgetting the muscle of like, "Oh, I'm in person," and you're able to give me this note in real time that I can be like, "Oh my god, thank you. Praise be. Yes, now I can enjoy my actual human body in real time and remember that it's not just this little square." So the
Right.
conversation, obviously, around like what is better, what is worse, what are we connecting more? We miss the people, we miss the notes,
Sure.
that part, and then also just generally self tapes as a medium for networking and having relationships that you have zero actual feedback from the other side. That is a
Sure.
conversation.
Sure. So there's pros and cons to both. And
Yeah.
I think the people who are um very vocal about missing in-person auditions, um of course they miss in-person auditions. It is a collaborative experience. You get to show up and act and get maybe get a note, but
Yeah.
possibly get a note and work with somebody. You don't have to think about tech stuff. You um, can get sort of immediate feedback, maybe even if it's just a like, great, thanks,
Yep.
but you also weren't guaranteed those things. You weren't guaranteed a redirect. You weren't guaranteed anything more than a sort of very tepid, thanks. Have a good one.
Correct.
You know, you could sit in the waiting room for hours. You could spend hours getting there, schlepping. You would have to cover shifts. There's all
Mhm.
kinds of pros and cons. Same thing with self tapes, pros and cons, right? Everybody. I think everybody knows the cons. The tech stuff is a major learning curve. The finding a reader is stressful.
Ugh.
Just,
I'm like, "Can
yep,
I
there it
change
is.
my dog to speak? Like, where are we at now?
I
Dog's
know.
the only thing that lives in this space with me."
I
Like,
mean,
yeah.
I get it. I get it. The lack of feedback is really troubling, but it also allows for a lifestyle that was never possible before.
Yeah.
Right? It allows you to go on vacation and not miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
It allows people who have suffer from major audition nerves to audition more fully without that getting in the way. Um, it allows for you to have a more stable job that pays your bills. It allows you to be present for your children. It allows you to audition even if you know you have a contagious illness. There's so many things, right? So again, pros and cons to both. I think auditioning is not a perfect system. It's never been a perfect system. I don't foresee it ever becoming a perfect
Yeah.
system. It is simply, something that we are always going to have pros and cons to, whatever it looks like. That
Yeah.
that is my personal opinion on it. Um, for me, the I think a lot of actors miss simply the validation of the in the room experience, like you were talking about, right? Just being reminded that you can act and move around and whatever, and it's like, you don't, your dog is not telling you that, you're not getting that feedback,
Yeah.
because you're thinking about all of the other things that you're doing with the self tape. So, and I think sometimes, even just the validation of a casting director smiling back at you and being like, thank you, that was great,
Mhm.
is you're not getting, right? You're
Correct.
uploading your tape into the void. You aren't hearing anything. If you're lucky, your agent or manager will reach out and be like, hey, great tape. If you're really lucky, you'll get a pin or a callback or
Yeah.
a something or a booking even from casting, but that's all the feedback you get. And I understand the frustration around that. I totally get it. Actors are not meant to act to nobody. You're meant to act to an
Yeah.
audience, right? Like you're missing that. And I think that's why some people choose to go to a self-tape studio, or they, choose to find that, because they are looking to recreate the experience of collaborating and getting sort of some sort of feedback from the person opposite them.
Yeah.
And I understand all of it. I understand all of it. That said, of course, I don't see self-taping going away.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing that we can do as collaborators is do better for each other, right? So yes, I think there are things that casting can do to help actors through the process, um, in a way that feels a bit more collaborative, as opposed to here's the instructions, go,
Mhm.
right? I think there are ways for actors to engage with casting directors a little bit more fully, even though we're not together in the same
In
space.
what way? Like, how could they do that?
So on every single self-tape request I send out, I put my email address in there, and I say, if the actors have any questions, they are welcome to reach out to me. And the number of people who take me up on that is like 0.003%.
Mhm.
And sometimes when they are taking me up on it, it's simply to ask about a slate or a
Well, I think
label.
it's most we've so many of us have been taught, and arguably, I think maybe I don't fall fully into this category because I don't play by those rules often, but to, like, quote unquote, stay in your lane, or like, oh, well,
Sure.
if you have your reps, then they're going to be the ones who are like talking for you and be like the middle person. And so you don't want to overstep. But I think there's also the assumption that nobody has the time. I think there's a lot that's going into play that, for better or for worse, is just the way that we're coming from it. But I
Yes,
hear
no, of
you.
course. I mean, I totally understand. And I know actors have the experience of reaching out to the rep saying, "Hey, can you ask casting this question for me?" And the rep saying, "No, no, no, don't bother casting."
Truly that.
Right? And I know, I hear it from actors. They tell me about it. And I've actually talked to an agent where I was like, she was like, "It's so funny that you put your email address in all of the instructions. We delete that before we send it on to our actors." And I'm like,
You're
"Why?"
like, I wouldn't have put it there if I didn't want them to know it. Like,
like it, I put it there for a reason. She's like, "We don't want them to bother you." And I'm like, "But they don't
yeah,
is the thing, is that, but that's the thing, is that if I'm putting it out there, I'm reaching out a hand saying, don't be afraid to collaborate with me if there's something that is going to be useful to you that you need some guidance on." And people just don't, I think, because they were taught not to, or maybe berated not
correct.
to, but all that does is put casting up on a pedestal, makes us sort of unhuman for actors, which is what makes actors so mad at us about
Yeah.
stuff, and that is not helpful to anybody. So it really is a catch-22. And again, I understand where actors are coming from, and you want to be professional, but it's not a test. It's the same thing as when an actor would walk in the room for a live audition, and before we started, we'd be like, "Do you have any questions?" not a test. It's not a like, how smart can you be? Can you ask a really intelligent question so it's clear that you
Did your
are
work.
engaged
Yeah.
on this? Whatever. It's not a test. It really is. It's a buffer between hi and are you ready to start?
Mhm.
Right. So if you don't have a question, you don't have to ask a question. But if you do have a question, we want you to feel like you can. I actually was just sort of counseling another actor on this. This is an actor who's been acting for a really long time in Los Angeles. All of us casting actors in LA know this person. We love him. He's one of the like really big heart. He's the kind of person who like we would always see for live auditions,
Mhm.
right? And he's struggling with the self-tape thing, much like everybody else. And I was reminding him, I was like, don't be afraid to collaborate. I was like, everybody in town knows you. Everybody knows you. And so that means if we're asking you to tape, we are excited to see your version of it. And if you're missing that collaboration, it's okay for you to reach out to us. We know you're not going to waste our time. We know you. And even for actors who we don't know, as long as you're not asking a question that is going to waste our time, we're not going to be mad about it. We
Right.
aren't. If it's something that is truly missing that's really going to help you, don't be afraid to ask. If you're asking me a question that I clearly spelled out in the instructions, we spend so much time putting those instructions together. That feels a little like you simply aren't following directions,
Yeah.
right? So again, you want to make sure, can you answer this question for yourself given all of the information you have? And if you can't, do what you would have done in the room and ask your question.
Yeah.
And self-taping has become so fast-paced, and truly the humanity has been stripped out of the audition process
Correct.
because we're not together, you're not seeing us, and it, like I said, it has really dehumanized casting, which, as we've all seen, has erupted into this major discussion, anger, experience. But we're still the same people. We're still human beings trying to do a job. And when you succeed, so do we.
Right.
So we want you to do well, right? We're not trying to make this harder on you.
Yeah.
We are expecting you to have learned how to do it by now,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Again, I think casting directors have tried over the last several weeks, especially, to reiterate that the number one technical goal is simply that we need to be able to see you and hear you clearly,
Yeah.
right?
Well, let's talk more about the details though, because I
Yeah.
think that is the thing. And I also want to caveat that you are one casting director and there are many casting directors
Yes.
and they all have different
Yes.
opinions. And
Yes.
that is probably for me, actually, and I imagine for many, the hardest part about all of this, where it's like
Yes.
one size is not one size fits all. It's
Right.
really
Right.
not.
Yes.
And this is
Yes.
for producers, this is for directors, this is for choreographers, this is for any collaborator that you will ever work
Yes.
with. But arguably, if the casting director is the person that you are trying to be seen for to get through to the thing, it's hard to
Yes.
like take one advice and put it to all the things because you're only going to hear a different thing the next time. And it's deeply
Yes.
infuriating. And I want to pull my eyeballs out from it.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway,
Yes. Totally.
with that
Totally.
said, from your opinion, let's go into the self taping actual technique stuff.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So seeing and hearing, are you talking
Yes.
mics or are you just talking
Nope.
silence in a room? Are you talking a
Silence
ring
is
light? Are you talking like what are you meaning?
silence is one of those things that you're just never going to happen for you,
Praise be.
right? It
Thank you.
didn't
Yeah.
happen for us in our casting offices
Mhm.
either, right? Like you're only going to get like true silence on a soundstage. Like,
Right.
let's be real,
So
right? So
my dog whining in the back or there being like a small
silence
little person brings garbage down the hallway,
does
you're
not matter.
cool, cool, cool.
It's the distracting noises. It's the continuous noises.
Mhm.
Let's say an ambulance with a siren on just parked itself outside your apartment.
Yep.
Yeah, that's distracting. A weed whacker going on and off and on and off, which is probably not really an issue in Brooklyn, but stuff like that.
You never know.
The,
Somebody has something for, different reasons.
yeah,
Yep.
totally.
Yep.
Voices in the background are not that big of a deal as long as we can't understand what they're saying, right?
Okay.
If we can hear full conversations going on, that can be a little distracting. But like I have kids, they're loud. I have a very funny story about my 5-year-old yelling. I was doing a Zoom audition and it was a really quiet scene. We were recording and the scene was ending. We were having this actor and I was really connected and we were having this really quiet moment together. And my 5-year-old ran into the hallway right outside my office and goes, "I need to poop." And it picked up on the recording as if he were in the room with me. I
Wow.
mean, so
Yep.
stuff like that, that can be a little distracting, but like a little whine from your animal, not that big of a deal. A child in the next room, or a child's TV show on in the next room where you can kind of hear bits and pieces but can't totally make it out, not a big deal.
Okay.
So again, the silence is not a thing. So the seeing and hearing really means that we need to be able to see your face and eyes clearly. That is the thing. A lot of the nuance of your performance that we're picking up exists in the upper portion of your face around your eyes, right? For your podcast listeners, I'm pointing between like my nose and the middle of my forehead.
Yes.
That's where it exists. So if you have a frame that's too wide, you've got great lights, you got mics, whatever, but your frame is too wide, we can't see your face clearly enough, that's not going to work,
Yeah.
right? So your frame is the number one thing. From there, it doesn't matter how you achieve the rest of it, right? So people are like, oh, I have to get a fancy ring light so I don't have shadows. Who cares? As long as those shadows aren't so overwhelming that we're missing the little nuance in the movement around your eyes, the little lines, the way your facial muscles move, it's fine.
Okay.
Right? So if you need to simply use natural light and redirect some lamps, cool. For sound, again, most people these days, I mean, gratefully, I suppose, since we're spending so much money on these, you have an amazing camera in your pocket, right, with your phone. But to get the frame that you need for your self-tape where we can see your face clearly enough, your device is going to be somewhat close to you, which means that mic is going to pick up what you need it to pick up.
Yeah.
So can you buy things to help you? Sure, of course. Let's say you want to self-tape at midnight and you don't have natural light, right? Buy a light, right? Yeah. So there are things you can buy there. You can buy a backdrop, you can buy a light, you can buy a mic, you can buy that stuff, but you don't have to. For me, the only thing that I always recommend to actors to purchase, and it's not even an expensive investment, it can be like $15, is a tripod for your camera or phone. That will save your sanity more than anything else.
Yeah.
So that is great. But there are other ways you can invest. I have an actor friend who invested in a little remote control for her camera, so she doesn't have to constantly get up and press the button. She just clicks this little thing. Right. That was a choice that she decided to make her life easier. I always tell actors, you don't need to have a backdrop. You can get one if you're like, I don't want to have to rearrange all the art on my walls. I don't want to have to paint a wall, whatever. So they want to invest in a backdrop. Cool. Fine. But that's not what we're hiring you for. Right. We're hiring you for the acting. And we simply need to be able to see the acting clearly and hear you clearly. And whatever that looks like for you is fine. Truly, truly.
Okay. What about the reader situation? Obviously, it's a touchy moment, but
Yes.
for many of us who don't have, who maybe live alone or don't have a partner or don't, have access to, a scene partner because you're not in class with people or whatever it is, and you're dealing with a Zoom moment. Do you have preferences about any of that?
No. First of all, we're all quite used to the sound of virtual readers, right? We all got used to it in 2020. Totally. Also, I think Zoom has evolved so much in the last 3 years where there's even not that much of an internet lag. There was a time where it's questionable, I would say. But it's not even that bad anymore. So I'm all for virtual readers. I think that's the easiest, most consistent way to go. Even if you have somebody who lives with you, you don't always want to use that person. You're going to strain that relationship, right? Whether they're a partner, a roommate, a spouse, or whatever, a parent. So I'm totally down with virtual readers, and now there's all kinds of discussion. There's a certain casting office down here in the Southeast that has been advising actors to use live readers, saying that their producers tend to gravitate toward those reads. And like, that is that person's experience. In my experience, my producers don't care. My producers have not cared at all. We do a lot of recording over Zoom ourselves, right? We do those recordings in producer callbacks, chemistry reads, whatever, where we are recording via Zoom. I do work sessions with actors that might need a little tweak here or there. I'm recording via Zoom. So we're already using those recordings to get people jobs. So I don't see why that has to be different than somebody's self-tape. That's my opinion. So I was talking with, when everything kind of came up with all of the articles and things like that, and we were all sort of speaking out about it, and being like, casting doesn't want you to do this. Casting wants blah 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 blah. We were sort of speaking in absolutes, right? Because we were
Mhm.
trying to clear the air. And an actor who I really respect reached out to me, and she was like, what you're saying is nice, and I think that that is something that you do really abide by, but a lot of us have had the opposite experience with casting directors,
Yeah.
particularly these specific people. And she showed me some language on somebody's EcoCast instructions and whatever, and that was a moment where I was like, okay, I cannot, as you sort of very rightly pointed out, cannot simply speak for my entire craft. I have to just
Yeah.
simply say, this is my opinion. This is how I feel about it. And I would say the majority of casting directors, the goal for us is simply to see and hear you
Yeah.
clearly. And there are a handful of casting offices who are saying, no, we want the most professional tape you could possibly send us.
Yeah.
And I get that and I get it. But what I would say is treat those experiences as the exception, not the rule.
Okay.
So don't take the experience the maybe extra effort that you're doing for those specific roles or auditions and put it onto all of your auditions, because
Yeah.
it's not necessary for all of your auditions. So that's what I would say is be mindful of the ones that are asking you to do a certain thing, or maybe even requiring you to do a certain thing, and don't assume that applies to all of us.
Yeah. What about the narrative of which I understand it, and I also think it's a bit harmful in some way of just be a good actor or just focus on the craft or focus on the work, which in some ways is actually undermining the exact thing that the actor is doing because now you're in your head about being a good actor and doing the craft and doing the work. Like,
Uh-huh.
right? So what about that narrative when it's like just be a good actor. Just do the
Sure.
work.
Well, and I think that that's where self-taping has really sort of taken a toll, I would say.
Yeah.
The actors down here in the Southeast, they've been self-taping for a decade or
Mhm.
more. So they did not have a major learning curve when the pandemic hit. But actors in New York and LA mostly did, I would say, because even if they had self-taped previously, they maybe hadn't learned to do it on their own,
Mhm.
right? Um, so it was a major learning curve, and I think in that learning curve you're spending so much time learning this new technique, including all of the things that go with it, the tech stuff,
Mhm.
the editing, how do I do this at all, how do I ask a friend to help me,
Yeah.
how all of this, it's a lot. And I understand that, and I think the focus in that learning experience shifted from the acting part to getting this new technique right, right. And what casting directors are trying to say now, and I'm one who says this, I'm all about the work 100%. We're trying to say, okay, you've all learned how to do this now, you have. In my classes that I teach audition technique classes, which of course are largely self-tape classes. I rarely have to comment on anybody's technical stuff anymore.
Mhm.
Almost never. So that's the thing, is that you all have learned how to do this. You know how to do
Yeah.
it from a technical side. Now we want you to get back to the thing that is what we're hiring you for. We want you to focus on the acting. We want you to focus on the work. We don't want you to think forever and ever about your backdrop color. We want you to be able to play. We want you to find the joy in performing, because
Yeah.
that is so appealing.
Yeah.
And did you always enjoy auditioning in person? No, let's be real,
Yeah.
right? There's all kinds of stress that goes around with that. You sit in the waiting room, you can hear what everybody before you is doing. That's not useful. There were all kinds of, again, pros and cons to both. But I think you can all start to trust the fact that you really do know how to self-tape from a technical side. Now, how can you have fun doing it?
Yeah.
And I think some people are not ready to have fun. It still feels very onerous. And at this point, they're wondering why they still have to do it. And so there's no joy in it. And that is that's a bummer. That's a bummer for everybody. So really, we're wanting you to find the enjoyment of your craft, the enjoyment of performing, the enjoyment of creating a character and digging deep, and really connecting to it, because that's what we want to see. That's what we've always gone for. The tech, bad tech can get in the way of that, which is why it was so important to learn how to manage the tech side of self-taping. But we really do want to see you get to play. We want that to be the main focus of your tape more than
Yeah.
anything else.
What about those people who aren't getting the auditions that they want, or they're not getting as many auditions? What do you recommend for those people who are not feeling the muscle used as much, and or the pressure when one comes in every couple of months that's like, "Oh god, this one has to work because I've only gotten this one."
Sure. Well, you got to practice, right? You have to
Mhm.
you have to sort of be able to fail when there's no stakes.
Yeah.
So so certainly you could take a class, but you can do it on your own. Easily do it on your own. Every single day, plan to tape something. It does not have to be a 5-page scene. It can be a half a page scene.
Yeah.
But get in front of your camera, set up your stuff, and press record, and do it every single day. So that way, when one does come in, a real one comes in, you aren't thinking like, oh, my muscle has atrophied. How I
Yeah.
got to warm it back up. You're thinking, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's no different than anything else. It is no different than anything else, except that maybe this time you're sending it somewhere.
Yeah.
You just want to make sure that you're practicing.
I'm curious if you have different tricks, and obviously this is like a quick question, but like different tricks for when somebody's called in for a co-star versus a guest star versus a series regular, or if it's just
Mm.
simply tuning into how you break down this text, and arguably there's probably more text to be breaking down.
Sure. Well, it totally starts with breaking down the text, of course.
Mhm.
No matter what size your role is,
Yep.
you need to use some script analysis skills and break down the text for sure. That is the first and foremost. But the difference between them is largely what's there on the page versus what isn't.
Mhm.
Right. So for co-stars, they're so undefined. We're looking for you to bring them to life. Right. We're not looking for you to make them all about yourself. We're simply looking for you to bring them to life.
Mhm.
Whereas with guest stars are much more clearly drawn. They're not going to change too dramatically from the text that you have to what you're going to do on set. They'll change, but like if they're a guest star, they're a major part of that episode,
Yeah.
and they're not going to change too much. They're much more clear. There's more there for you to work with. Um, and you can kind of really use what's there and dig in and trust that's what you're bringing to life is what's right there in front of you. Series regulars are so much about us falling in love with an actor that we're going to want to see on our screens for 7 years,
Mhm.
right? And so what you are doing with what's there on the page, it really is a framework. It's an important framework, of course, and you want to make sure that you're matching tone and stuff like that. But we're dying to see your take on this character.
Mhm.
How can you imbue yourself into this character? How can you connect with this character? Because that is going to be the thing that makes us interested and intrigued. Um, with series regulars, of course, they're, clearly drawn and pitched to the network and, all of these things, but they change. They can change depending on the actor. Um, it's happened for me on multiple projects where this is what the type that we're looking for, and they go with somebody sort of just right or left of that type because that was the most interesting person, and then they sort of shift some of the character and the dialogue to fit that person because they love the
Mhm.
person. So with each of them, the way you come at them is a little bit different. I would say co-stars and series regulars are more aligned with each other in that way than guest stars and series regulars. Guest stars, like I said, are much more um, firm in what
Mhm.
they're, how by the time you receive it to audition, that is largely what the character is going to look like, right? Co-stars, they're not that clear. They're a little bit murky. There is a believability to them that we need to have because they're on screen for such a short amount of time. So they are rooted in something really meaningful there, and you have to sort of bring them back to life from that.
Mhm.
But with series regulars, similarly, they're going to be rooted in something, whether it's a job that they do that they're really good at, or a personality type or whatever. But then the producers just simply want to fall in love and find somebody really interesting who can make this character even more fun, interesting, human than they ever imagined it could be, and then write to that person.
Yeah. Do you have any tricks or things that you feel you've seen over the years that have made you be like, "Oh, yeah, these are the types of things that are making people ace their auditions," or is it more just like they just brought themselves and they really made the text their own?
It's really about trusting your craft.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times actors, because again, you're not getting feedback,
Yep.
and I realize that's hard. So without the feedback, some actors just kind of spiral and they're like, I didn't get that thing. Okay, let me just try something in this tape. And you kind of start to throw your instincts out the window a little bit. So the people who tend to succeed are truly comfortable in their instincts, in their muscle,
Yeah.
right? They're confident in their choices because they've done their text homework. They're comfortable in their bodies because they have figured out how to be fully alive in this small box.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is meaningful. That's what sort of really stands out. The people, it's the same thing that stood out in a live audition: connection, listening, presence, breathing, energy. It's the exact same things. It's the things that you know how to do, but are really easy to forget as you're trying to manage your lights and direct your reader and make sure you get this uploaded on time, and all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's now that you have mastered the tech part, yes, you still have some stress that you're dealing with around deadlines and readers and things like that. And, you know, how quickly can you learn this material? But you have to go back to your instrument. That is the thing that we're always going to gravitate towards. And it's the thing that is going to make people want to hire you
Yeah.
above above all else, above how beautiful your tape looks, above your gorgeous sound and your almost no background noise and whatever. That's not the thing. It is the acting, and it is just really easy to not let that be the priority when you've got all this other stuff that you're thinking about
Yeah.
when you're self-taping.
Yeah. As we wind down our time, is there anything that is on your heart or mind that you want a listener to know?
I mean, I've said this before, and I try to reiterate this as much as possible on social media too. But like, casting directors really are on your side. It is like I said, it's so easy to forget that we are your collaborators and we are your cheerleaders, and I understand that, and it can feel like, in fact, we are your taskmasters when we're giving you all of these instructions and you're never hearing from us. And I understand the feelings 100%. I understand them. But we are speaking your names all day long. We are staring at your faces all day long. We are selling you to our producers, to our executives, to our other casting friends all day long. I told somebody recently, I spend more time working with and speaking to actors than I do with my own children. so, we really are, we are there, and it's really easy to forget that. It's easy to think that somebody in our office is doing that work and it's not us, it's us. And the way each casting director manages that process and works with their staff, of course, is unique to them, and we will just leave that at that. But
Mhm.
we cannot be in this job without loving actors. We spend our entire days are about you.
Yeah.
So if you can remember that on the other side of the internet is somebody who's rooting for you, somebody who's cheering you on. If we're asking you to audition, we're excited to see your take on it. If you can remember that, hopefully that can help you reconnect with some of the joy of the process.
Yeah.
And I understand it's hard, and I totally empathize with it. I totally empathize with it, but we are here and we are excited about you. We're excited to see what you can do with it.
For anybody who wants to follow along with your journey, but honestly, just to like really get tons and tons and tons of info, Where can people find you, work with you, reach out, all of those
Sure.
things?
So I am largely these days on Instagram.
Mhm.
I am still technically on Twitter, although Twitter is just,
Yeah. Mhm.
going,
Yeah.
it's a special hellscape right now. Um, so on both Instagram and Twitter, you can find me at Erica S. Bream Cast. My whole thing on Instagram is that I am going for as much transparency as possible. I want you
Mhm.
all to know what the process is like. I want you to know the things that you don't know. I want to answer questions, and that is what I aim to do with that.
Yeah.
I have a website. You can also reach me through my website, which is ericasbreamcasting.com. You can find me there too. But yeah, I'm me and my thumbs are on Instagram more than anything else. So
Thank you so much for this. I had so many questions that I didn't even get to because
I'm
I
so
was like,
sorry.
"No, it's not, no, this is exactly what it needed to be." I'm just my brain is like full of them. And so this is just the beginning, and I'm so grateful to you for taking this time away from your sick little young ones and also your job.
Thank
But
you. Thank you for
arguably
having
this
me.
is, of course, this is hopefully going to demystify and clarify and continue bringing forward more joy into
Yeah.
an actor's process. So thank you so, so much for being in this space.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for encouraging empowered artists.
Thank
That's what we're
you.
here for, right?
Yes.